End quote. In recent videos, I have been talking a lot about the ways in which men are biologically superior to women. The fact is, however, that the criteria by which superiority is judged is somewhat subjective. For instance, if that criteria is athletic strength or problem-solving intelligence, men are clearly the superior gender. On the other hand, women actually have a superior sense of taste. They are more likely to be super tasters, physiologically possessing more taste buds on average than men. You might assume that this would give women an edge in the culinary arts, and that assumption would certainly align with our conventional wisdom that cooking is a domain of the feminine. Surely this must be a female-dominated profession. If you watch television game shows like Hell's Kitchen, which pits equal-sized teams of men and women against each other, you might even be forgiven for thinking that the numbers are close to 50-50. The reality, however, is that females actually account for less than 20% of professional chefs. If we narrow down our focus from all chefs to just the accomplished or outstanding chefs, that already meagre number shrinks significantly, with female chefs accounting for less than 1% of awarded Michelin stars. In the 2012 guide, there were roughly 2,500 restaurants that were awarded stars by Michelin. Of those, only 10 of them had a female head chef. Narrowing our focus of excellence down even further, in the century-long history of the Michelin Food Guide, only 9 women have ever achieved the highest honour of 3 Michelin stars. A truly pathetic underachievement that Michelin themselves thought necessary to flaunt last International Women's Day. Whether it's an issue of raw talent, true grit, or a mixture of both, women just don't seem to have what it takes. To the extent that a proportion of women do choose to pursue a career in fast-paced, high-stress professional kitchens, fewer still are actually prepared or capable of putting in the additional hard work required to excel within that professional environment. It was men who built your house and every other building that you see around you. It's men who mine the coal that keep your electric lights on. Men manufacture your household goods. Men fix your car when it breaks down. Men keep the sewage from backing up. Men keep the trains running on time. Men run and work the farms which grow your food. And men cook your meals at restaurants. And keep in mind that these are just the tradesmen and technicians who actually made it happen. It was also male architects and male engineers who had the vision to design all of these buildings, cars, civil works and farming equipment in the first place. Civilization is a male endeavour. I suspect that if we were actually able to calculate an average female contribution, including not just their raw representative numbers, but also their hours worked, industry experience and specific areas of specialty, the real-world input that these women have made towards building and maintaining our civilization, even in the current year, would likely be well below 10%. But what about an industry such as nursing? Unlike our commonly held misconceptions of cooking, we know for a fact that nursing is overwhelmingly female-dominated, to the tune of 90%. Well, would you believe me if I told you that we see the exact same trend we do with Michelin stars? Women may dominate nursing in raw numbers, but it is still the men who dominate in terms of excellence and achievement. 90% of registered nurses are female, but when it comes time to specialise in a specific field of expertise, that gender gap narrows significantly. This page, which ranks 5 of the highest paying nurse specialties, shows that nurse anaesthetist was the highest paying specialty by a fairly wide margin. It also states that the gender divide in this particular specialty basically reaches parity, with male nurses slightly ahead at 51%. Yeah. Who'd have guessed? Male nurses put in the hard work required to specialise in difficult, higher-paying fields. Colour me surprised that as a result, many of the articles that Google returned while I was trying to search for information on gender breakdowns of specialty were salty articles bitching about the fact that women dominate the nursing field, yet men make more. Male nurses earn more than female nurses. At least a few had the common decency to explain that based on the actual data, it was a result of personal specialisation choices rather than systemic sexism. But, I'm sure those articles are just part of the grand patriarchal cover-up to gaslight female nurses. One study on NCBI PubMed found that whilst 90% of registered nurses are female, 30% of first authors writing nursing literature were male. That is a pretty fucking significant difference. Going by their proportional representation in the industry of 10%, male nurses are basically publishing papers at a rate 3 times higher than their average female counterparts. Even in an industry overwhelmingly dominated by women, when it actually comes time to make an impact on that field, whether that is through writing white papers to be published in nursing journals or undertaking additional training to get into difficult specialties like anaesthetics, it is still overwhelmingly men who put in the additional hard work required. The researchers predictably chalk this huge discrepancy in published literature up to gender bias. But even their own feeble definition of bias basically amounts to female nurses personally prioritising social and family responsibilities over their careers, rather than anything that could be remotely described as institutional sexist discrimination. Yeah, right, social responsibilities. In other words, she wants to go out boozing with her friends instead of putting the extra hours into career development that her male co-workers do. And somehow, that personal choice apparently constitutes bias against her. I recently read the book Do No Harm by Henry Marsh, wherein he recounts one anecdote of a female anaesthetist who almost railroaded an operation for an elderly woman who'd already had her surgery delayed once that week already. She was the on-call anaesthetist, and when Marsh finally found her lounging around in the staff room drinking coffee and gossiping, she flat out refused to start an operation at 4 in the afternoon as planned, claiming that she didn't have childcare that night. In Marsh's own words, quote, "For a few moments I was struck dumb. I thought how until a few years ago a problem like this would never have arisen. I always try to finish the list at a reasonable time, but in the past everyone accepted that sometimes the list would have to run late. In the pre-modern NHS, consultants never counted their hours. You just went on working until the work was done." End quote. There is a reason why doctors are paid shitloads of money and are expected to work long hours. The list he refers to is the list of life-saving neurosurgical operations that he had to perform that day. You just went on working until the work was done because the alternative, getting lazy and knocking off early, effectively meant killing people. I mean, that is truly terrifying to me. We have moved well beyond the hypotheticals of gender pay scales and aggregate difference in nursing specialisation here. We are now in the tangible world of specific life or death medical decisions, and apparently in that world, these bitches will literally put your life at risk without a second's thought just so they can knock off a little earlier to go home and play with their stupid kids. In my own humble opinion, if that's really where this lady's priorities lie, then she has clearly chosen the wrong profession. She is not suitable for the job of surgical anaesthetist. But I digress. Despite his own internal desire to yell at the woman, "Bugger childcare, you'll never work with me again," Marsh never goes so far as to explicitly blame this life-endangering workplace complacency on women increasingly entering the medical field. But there does seem to be ample evidence to suggest that this is the root cause of the problem. The physician who authored this article published in the Daily Mail laments the future of the NHS given that 2017 marks the first year that female doctors have outnumbered male doctors in the UK. From 2007 to 2012, the number of female doctors under the age of 30 has increased by 18%, whilst the number of males decreased by 1%. Whilst he purports to be a feminist, he notes that these numbers are somewhat troubling given that most female doctors end up working part-time, usually in general practice, and then retire early. Such a huge demographic increase in female physicians under the age of 30 now could mean a massive deficit in public health services later on. To give you an idea about the true scope of the problem that this guy is worried about, according to the numbers, 63%, almost 2/3 of female doctors in the NHS work less than full-time, versus only 8% of male doctors. When broken down by sector, 19% of men versus 83% of women in general practice were working part-time. And in hospital specialties, whilst only 3% of men were working part-time, at 46%, almost half of all female hospital doctors were working part-time. In fact, not only were women working significantly fewer hours, but other studies have also shown that per hour worked, the male doctors were also working significantly harder than their female counterparts. Quote, including only consultants on full-time or maximum part-time contracts, men have significantly higher activity rates than women, after accounting for age, specialty, and hospital trust.